Right, well, good evening all, if anyone's there. I'm going to start off with a piece of music. For a change, I used to do this all the time when we started these streams, but haven't done it for a bit, so let me just get the necessary piece of music up here, and I will proceed to treat you to a reasonably politically incorrect old piece of music. Here we go.
One, two, three.
excuse me. Let's turn the microphone volume up a bit and clear the mucus out of the back of my throat. And pop in to say hello, everybody. Good evening. Good evening, Pete. Hi, Andy. Hugh, hello. Muppets, hello. Hugh, you had the Bonzo's albums out. No, I've gone way back beyond that, actually, as we will find out, hopefully, in the next hour or so. Debbie, good evening. Great to see you here. Hope everyone's well. Hope everyone's having a good time, enjoying yourselves. That was, of course, that famous number used as an audition piece for Decca Records in 1962, was it, by the Beatles. The Sheikh of Araby. Actually a early 20th century pop song, which lasted for a very long time, and as I said at the beginning, possibly before anybody arrived, it was going to be a politically incorrect performance to start things off, and that's probably going to continue for quite a lot of tonight. I haven't got the Bonzo's albums out, Hugh. What I've done is, it's once again, I'm bouncing off this beast, which for those who haven't seen it, this is the C Melody saxophone. A wonderful thing. It's not as big as a tenor saxophone. It's bigger than an alto saxophone. It's in the key of C. They were phenomenally popular between roughly 1912 and 1930. In 1930, America was hit and the rest of the world was hit by a massive economic depression following the Wall Street crash, and novelty saxophones went out of fashion and they literally stopped making them. So this instrument's probably about 90 years old, although I actually suspect that it was made in Europe, not in America, and could have been made later. I don't know. Very difficult to find out much about European sax makers and their history, unless they are Selmer and based in France, and set the gold standard for modern saxophones. So this is an old saxophone. It has a very specific sound of its own that I'm working on quite a lot at the moment, and it's very much associated with those older kind of pop records. In fact, I don't know whether Roger Ruskin Spear or Rodney Slater actually had a C Melody saxophone in the Bonzo Dog Doodah band. I would have thought quite possibly, because they were very easy to get hold of. They still are. There are millions of the things made in the 1920s. They're now easy enough to get hold of. They're getting more expensive. All old saxophones are in demand at the moment. I'm looking on eBay and seeing people wanting £1,000 for battered-looking C Melody saxophones, which is frankly outrageous. It's a bit like house prices. It's way too much. I got this mystery item, which I think everybody thought was broken, for 250 quid, which was a heck of a price. And it says on the horn, I think I've said this before on one of these, it says Hess's, 20 Manchester Street, Liverpool. So it's Hess's Music Shop, an old classic. Hello Trevor, good evening mate. An old classic Liverpool music shop, one of the first places the Beatles bought their guitars. The other being Rushworth's Music Shop right across the road. Manchester Street is a curving road up the side of the entrance to the Mersey Tunnel, and I don't think Hess's were in there after 1950, so that's kind of like an end date for when this saxophone could have been made. It's much more likely though that it's probably pre-war. And I've been playing on it, and I've been investigating the music and the background of the C Melody saxophone, which is what brings me into all these cheesy old numbers that I have for you tonight. 10 past, I'll play another one. I've got a whole file of these things. It's marvellous. Stuff that is mostly associated with Dixieland jazz, although they weren't particularly Dixieland numbers. They were pop songs that were brought into the Dixieland repertoire, particularly in the 1950s. So, yeah, let's play another one. Let me just sort myself out here. Hello there, Indra. Where am I? Oh yeah, everybody, absolutely everybody knows this one. I believe that if you go to New Orleans and you go to see the Preservation Hall Jazz Band, they have a sign up saying something along the lines of, you know, you're going to have to pay double if you want to request us to play this number. I'm not going to charge you double. I'm just going to have a go at playing it. If I can find the file. Yep. Okay, let's go.
1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Didn't quite expect that ending, but on the other hand, I did manage to guess where it was. I couldn't actually see it on the screen. Got too many layers going on here. So yes, that was of course When the Saints Go Marching In. Let me just pause for a second to see what you've all been saying. Right, excellent. I'm watching you through Oculus. Wow, okay, you knew it first by the Searchers. I think I probably first knew it by Kenny Ball and his Jazzmen. Oculus. Okay, Trevor, let me know, what is Oculus? I could go and search it on Google, but I've got lots of old stuff about saxophones to talk about. First, let me just put this down for a moment. I'll get back to playing it in a little bit. There we are. I have to park it carefully. It doesn't fit any kind of modern saxophone stand properly. So if you just put it down casually, you can put a normal saxophone in place casually and it will just slot in. If you put a C melody in, it will fall over to the side, crash to the ground, and you're probably faced with lots of repair jobs to do. Microphone looking okay, microphone levels looking good. Let's get through a few more things here. Get rid of some of this whiffle that Facebook's putting up on the screen in front of me. Today's drinking utensil has, I think, been seen before. I've run out of original drinking utensils after, 36 of these streams. I've done pretty well, I'd have thought. But although it has been seen before, let me just pull the camera down a little bit. What you've got today is you've got a matching drinking utensil and t-shirt. If you can see, yep, there's the drinking utensil. Trying to get this in the right place so you can see, yep, there it is, and there is the t-shirt that goes with it. Or is it the t-shirt that goes with the drinking utensil? Could be either. Oh, a virtual reality headset. Am I virtual? Am I real? Are you sitting there? Good Lord, are you sitting there with your head completely surrounded in something solid? I can picture you sitting there in an armchair, sort of head back, staring fixedly, or not staring because you can't see anything. Presumably, you've got a headset which contains this in. What's it like? What is it like? I actually can't imagine the experience. I realise these things are fairly common these days, but can't imagine it. Right, let's just tip that forward a bit. Goog mug. Yeah, it is a good mug. I like it. It says, keep on walking. And it has the green men in a fringe around it. And the red man at the back. The red man is actually on the back of the t-shirt as well. I'm not going to stand up and show you that though. As Andy says, there is a limit to how many cups will fit in the kitchen cupboards, and I don't have many. This week, the drinking utensil contains a supermarket own brand Ribena with no added sugar. What that doesn't tell me is exactly how much sugar was in it before they didn't add any more, but apparently these are okay for me to drink, and they're quite tasty. So, and a bottle of it costs buttons. So, mix it with tap water. Hooray! Getting this out of the way now. Cupboards. Hey, it's okay. Don't worry, chaps. It's Facebook. It's a computer. Everybody spells oddly, and I can kind of just about figure it out. The Batman item for today is actually not fully unleashed as yet. It is a pair of Batman lounge pants. Yep, there you go. Men's lounge pants. This may well be a feature on the next tour for late nights on the buses with a glass of wine and a pair of Batman trousers. Oh, it's absolutely, tell me, cutting edge. Until you've lived life down at Home and Bargains, you haven't lived life, is what I'm saying to myself at the moment. So we got Batman, and now let's get back to where I was going to. The C melody saxophone, very popular in the 1920s. Do you want a pair as well, lady? I'm sure I can organise some. Although haven't really got you down as the Batman Lounge Pants type. Psychedelic is more your sort of thing, or Muppets, obviously. Bum. These saxophones were very popular in the mid 1920s, and they were associated with the pop music and the dance music of that time. And I was sort of thinking about this. I've been listening to a lot of 1920s dance bands in the last couple of weeks. Paul Whiteman, in particular, Frankie Trumbauer, Jean, I think is the correct pronouncement, Goldcat, and some of them are tremendous. Fletcher Henderson, another one. Henderson is very much in the lines of jazz, but there's a distinction, and I want to look at this. There's a distinction in the 1920s between dance band music and jazz music. Jazz, as we understand it today, has a lineage which kind of comes out of New Orleans, from the marching bands, big availability of second-hand military band instruments, which determined an instrumentation which was built up in the red light district, Storyville, in New Orleans, in the around about the First World War era, and in the 1920s started to get onto record and started to move north, with some of the bands moving up to New York and getting hotel gigs and restaurant gigs there, also to Chicago, and jazz follows on from there. However, I then looked at the case of Paul Whiteman. Paul Whiteman was a dance band leader. He was a trained violinist. He played in orchestras when he started off in the music business. He came from Denver, Denver, Colorado, not a town associated with jazz at all. And he started playing in jazz bands in San Francisco. Also, not a band associated with jazz at all. But Whiteman claimed that he came across a kind of jazz music in, again, the brothels, the red light district, which in San Francisco was the Barbary Coast. And out of that he developed an idea. Whiteman's big defining idea throughout his successful career was to try and make the dance band music respectable by marrying it up with classical music or with orchestral concert hall light music. And to that end he ended up staging 8 concerts over the course of about 12 years, in which he presented, hang on, I've got a quote here, I wrote something down, the R. Deems Taylor, who was the announcer at the last of these concerts. The concerts were called Experiments in Modern Music. And as the announcer put it at the final concert in 1938, it was an attempt to give, quote, writers in a lighter vein a chance to say something a little more ambitious than they could in the form of a popular song or a dance number. So the explicit aim here was to break down the divide between pop music, composition and performance, and concert hall music, composition and performance, by demonstrating that pop composers could write successful orchestral music. Now this is kind of a process of making pop music respectable, which we're familiar with easily within recent years. I'm thinking of the extended compositions associated with progressive rock in the 1970s, the tendency to develop concept albums by various hip-hop and rap artists. Offhand I'm thinking, I don't really know a great deal about this, but offhand I'm thinking of the likes of Eminem and Kanye West, who seem to make albums which are linked together. It's a full-scale concept album. The idea of the concept album is to make an extended piece of music much in the vein of classical music. It's a process of making things respectable. And Whiteman was doing this with a band which also hired a lot of top jazz musicians, people like trumpeter Bix Beiderbecke, violinist Joe Venuti, trombonist Jack Teagarden, Bing Crosby, sang for Whiteman. He was Hoagy Carmichael, the pianist, was involved at one stage. Singer Mildred Bailey. Whiteman, as I think it was Venuti who said, "Don't make fun of Whiteman. He hires the best musicians and he pays them the best rates in the business." So you've got a bit of a you've got a bit of a commercial aspect going on here. Do you know, Indra, I haven't heard anything by Eminem for about 20 years, and I've got so much music on my plate, I probably won't get around for it, but cool, nice one. Where was I? Back to my little cheat sheet that you can't see. But there is... Whiteman seems to contradict this standard narrative of jazz music. I mean, he doesn't fit the picture. You know, if it's a music, an African-American music coming out of New Orleans and spreading throughout the country with a particular style of playing, where does that leave a guy who was an overweight, white dance band leader from Denver? You know, he's basically got a pretty bad press from jazz historians over the last 50, 60 years. But you listen to the music and he's doing very very impressive, innovative and generally quite clever arrangements. Early on, his music seems to be based on things like the original Dixieland Jazz Band, which was a white band from New Orleans, but a white band which got on record as early as 1917, their Livery Stable Blues, 78, or is it a 78 at that point? I'm not sure whether it's a roll. Might have been a 78, might have been a cylinder, might have been both, in fact. Both formats were available at the time, but that was a kind of comedy jazz record. We're getting back to the Bonzos here. Comedy jazz with instruments making farmyard sound effects. And Whiteman, in his early days, around 1919, 1920, was following that kind of line. And he had musicians around who followed that line as well. But it developed slowly as good arrangers came in. People like Don Redman, who was African American, but he didn't play with the band, but he wrote a lot of charts. Bill Chalice, these guys wrote intelligent, interesting, complicated charts for the bands, which kind of mixed the dance beats, the standard dances of the day, which were the foxtrot, a two-step, and the waltz, obviously in 3/4, and added kind of syncopated elements from ragtime, and elements from these comedy early jazz records, and put together a very intricate kind of music. By the late 20s, it's very impressive. Some of these players, Frankie Trumbauer in particular, is the only known virtuoso of the C melody saxophone. Trumbauer was a tremendous player. I recommend his work with his own orchestra and with the Jean Colquet band, who had the best and most innovative arrangements around, better in a way than Whiteman's, but then wasn't making as much money as Whiteman. Whiteman had a very commercial head. He kept it safe, as it were, for people to listen to, but introduced a lot of these jazz elements to an audience that would probably not have heard them otherwise. So, you know, it's the history of jazz is not a straightforward thing at all. It's time, I think, to play some more music. What have I got? Oh, Debbie, are you telling your sister to shut up? Shocking. Let's see what I've got here. Okay, let's pull something out which became a popular Dixieland number. Not so much a dance number, not a blues particularly either. St. James Infirmary.
1, 2, 3.
Oh, St James Infirmary, another classic number, not quite a blues, not really quite anything particularly, written I believe by a music business type. Christine, bonsoir, hello everyone from France. Here's Christine. We have Christine and lots of people are saying hello as well, that's great. Yep, absolutely, Hugh, it gets in. Georgie Fane, Hugh Laurie, yep, all those people. Louis Armstrong, I'm sure. Louis Armstrong. I've got a sneaking suspicion that Frank Zappa threw it in somewhere. I know he threw in Ain't Necessarily So in an instrumental medley which he called, what was it? It Ain't Necessarily the St James Infirmary. Yes, that's right, he mixed the two together. It Ain't Necessarily So being a number by George Gershwin, who we're going to get round to in a moment. and St James Infirmary. Right, once again, I shall carefully put this thing on its stand, have another little sip of liquid, and see where I am. So Whiteman had this aim. Paul Whiteman, the dance band, 1920s dance band leader, had this aim of marrying together. The phrase often associated with this is making a lady out of jazz, which is a terrible thing to say, but it is the 1920s. People talked in that kind of way back then, and it was to make jazz respectable by combining it with the ideas of classical music. And to that end, let me just get me point here. Yes, he staged these between 1924 and 1938. Whiteman staged 8 concerts to which he gave the title Experiments in Modern Music. The idea being to give popular composers an opportunity to write something that was more, as they would put it, more ambitious, as the announcer would put it, more ambitious than a popular song or a dance number. The big success, in fact the only really lasting success of the series, occurred at the very first concert in 1924, which featured the premiere of a piece for piano and dance band, or small orchestra, called Rhapsody in Blue, written by a successful songwriter of popular songs, musicals, George Gershwin. The stories about this, it's well documented. Gershwin wrote up the piece at the last minute, handed it in to be performed only about a week, handed the score to the Whiteman Band about a week before the concert. It was hastily scored up by the band's arranger, Ferdy Grofe, and the piece was not complete at the concert. Gershwin wrote, excuse me, little explosion of cheap label Ribena there, I think. At the concert, Gershwin basically improvised a lot of the piano parts. Because he hadn't yet written them out. The score was full of instructions like watch me to come in for the downbeat, and Whiteman had to keep an eye on Gershwin at the piano to know how to put the piece together. We've no idea how it actually sounded. It was enormously successful immediately. The audience loved it, and it completely changed Gershwin's career and led in fact to him being acclaimed as the first great American composer. Not exactly true. There were people like Charles Ives around and Henry Cowell, but Gershwin achieved something like a popular and very distinctively American orchestral composition, and it remains hugely popular to this day. As I said, nothing else in the sequence. There were some tremendously good bits. Van Cleve, who ended up as a writer of music for B-movies and westerns. He did a lot of the music for the Gunsmoke series in the 50s and 60s. He wrote a piece called The Seventh Day for the 1938 concert, which is an extraordinary thing, sort of 7-minute piece, which kind of zips between sounding like Wagner and sounding like the French Impressionists, Debussy and Ravel. A tremendous piece of work, but it didn't get him anywhere. He carried on writing scores for movies like The Colossus of New York and other great cheesy B-movies of the 1940s, 1950s. The only other success really was the arranger who had written the parts for Gershwin's Rhapsody for that 1924 concert, Ferdy Grofe, who the next year orchestrated Gershwin's follow-up, a piano concerto in F, and then went into writing classical music himself in a light classical kind of way. Grofe, I think Grofe, for those, Hugh will know what I'm talking about. I don't know if anybody else does at all. Grofe was perhaps the American equivalent of someone like the British composer Eric Coates, who wrote very clever, very skillful orchestral music which never really cracks particularly into the orchestral concert hall repertoire, but remains very good and very well worth listening to. Grofé wrote a lot of music. Not much has even made it onto record, but a lot of it's well worth hunting out, starting with his Grand Canyon Suite, which was his big hit. Plenty of recordings of that around. Right, where are we? Hugh, remembering the film St. Louis Blues? Yes, the young boy being beaten by his middle-class parents because he plays jazz on his clarinet, which reminds me of the Benny Goodman story, when the teacher takes all the young lads at school into a room, opens up a cupboard and says, right, grab an instrument, we're going to form a band. And everyone, his friends march off, like blowing away on trombones and tootling away on trumpets, and whoever's playing Benny Goodman at that point in the film stands there looking very upset, holding a clarinet and saying, I just got stuck with this lousy clarinet. Terrible American accent there, I don't know where that came from. I got stuck with this lousy clarinet. I can't do an American accent tonight. I can't do any accent tonight. Yeah, movies. And of course, Rhapsody in Blue, there was a movie called Rhapsody in Blue, which was a very fictionalised story of Gershwin and his career, and featured as a set piece the Whiteman Band performing the original arrangement of Rhapsody in Blue, which runs to about 9 or 10 minutes. There's also an orchestral version, much more common, which runs to 15 or 16 minutes, expands everything out a bit to make it. Still, 15 minutes is an odd length for a concert piece, which is perhaps one reason why it didn't cross over. But there are other reasons as well, and I'm going to get round to those in a bit. But first, I think perhaps another piece of music. And I'm sorry, everybody, I'm very stuck on these old numbers at the moment. Let me just get a bit of a reference point up here. Yep, right. Let's give this a try. And Hugh just mentioned the movie St. Louis Blues, so clutching quickly for the saxophone once again. Let's actually try doing the St. Louis Blues, which is a very early piece with the title Blues, written by the Memphis-based band leader W.C. Handy, as early as I think 1912. Let's check that. No, that's no use at all. Right, okay. Thought I had the date there, but I didn't. I think it's about 1912, 1913. Let's give it a go then. The St. Louis Blues.
One, two, 1, 2, 3, 4.
W.C. Handy's St. Louis Blues, and a slight change from the rest. The rest of the numbers I've played tonight have not been blues. They've been more like the foxtrot two-step style of the 1920s. Blues is very nice and relaxing for me to play because that's basically what I started out playing. Blues was what I was listening to in the late 60s, mid-60s even, all part of the British blues boom. And it's I can relax into it quite a lot. So that one was good fun. That was good fun. Right, where am I? Okay, love it. Yeah, not heard that one for a long time, Pete. Yeah, Laverne Baker, tremendous version. Thanks for the claps and thingy what's it, guys. Yeah, I'm putting a lot of work into this sax at the moment and trying to get the actual sound of the saxophone out. It's a lot of people seem to make it sound like a tenor, because it's a mouthpiece problem. You don't get mouthpieces with these things. The original mouthpieces have all vanished. This is actually a very bargain basement mouthpiece made for C Melody saxophones. Surprised to get it at such a low price. So it's got the right kind of shape and timbre. I'm having to use a tenor sax ligature, that's this little tightener bit to hold the reed, the bit of bamboo which makes the sound in place. So it's all a bit cobbled together, but it's beginning to feel like its own instrument, which I'm really happy about. It's getting to play a new saxophone for the first time in many years, I guess. I started on alto, I moved on to soprano, bought a soprano in the 1980, around then anyway. and bought my first tenor in 1983. Didn't like it particularly. It was stolen a couple of years later. I managed to replace it for a very low price with a much better one, and learned how to love the tenor. And then the baritone came in. The baritone came in for playing, specifically for playing Pink Floyd. So I got one of those about 15, 16 years ago. And they're all lovely instruments. I fall in love with each of them at different times. And now I've got a fifth one, which is great. And I'm having to start all over again, which is wonderful. It's just so much fun. I'm going to carry on working on this, and I'm going to carry on trying different mouthpieces, different sound productions as well. Thank you, Christine. Merci bien, he said. And I can't do accents tonight, so I apologise for my dreadful French accent. French, it's one of these languages I can read French, I can't speak French. Two entirely different ways of communicating. Which, to close things off, because we're getting on, it's 10 to 9. And I did mention writing in the header to this event. I was referring to music and writing, whereas I've only really gone on about music. So, this business about that I was banging on about a few minutes ago, about making pop music respectable by mixing it with concert hall music. What is the difference? What is the difference? Why is it that pop music is not respectable and concert hall music is? And I found a very interesting point in an extremely ambitious book called no less, The Oxford History of Western Music. It's the kind of thing you would normally expect to be an anthology of essays by various experts, but no, this one is a 4,000-page, 5-volume book written by one American musicologist. And in his introduction, he makes this point, which I think is very good, and I'll just read it out. He's in academic language, I might have to translate it. What he writes is, all the genres of classical music, aristocratic and bourgeois music, academic, sacred and secular music for public concerts, private soirees and dancing, are literate genres. That is, they are genres which have been disseminated primarily through the medium of writing. The sheer abundance and generic The sheer abundance and generic heterogeneity of the music so disseminated in the West is a truly distinguishing feature, perhaps the West's signal musical distinction. Hang on, let me just move this over. Oh, I disappeared. No, nothing's fallen in front of the camera. Oh yes, something has fallen in front of the camera, yeah. Good grief. Yes, sorry about that, I'm back. That can only have fallen in front of the camera because I put it there, quite unconscious. I'm really sorry to hear that, lady. I've been worrying about him all evening. In fact, I was quite close to cancelling this stream because I was actually sitting there worrying about him like mad. I suggest we'll have to go out tomorrow, have a walk around the area and see if he's got himself up on a wall or a shed or something and is afraid to jump down. Sorry, I'm talking to Laney here. One of Laney's cats has disappeared. He went out yesterday afternoon, he hasn't come back, and this is very unlike him. He likes his food. He likes his food and a cosy place to sleep for the night, so he's normally in, and he hasn't, so there's a bit of worry going on here about the missing cat, whose name is Pink Floyd. For those of you here who have an interest in Pink Floyd, yes, Lenny has a cat called Pink Floyd, and he's a little cutie. Well, he's not being a little so-and-so. So, anyway, music. Richard Taruskin, the author of the Oxford History of Western Music, is suggesting here that what distinguishes classical music is that it's written down, whereas popular music historically is not written down, or is written down in very small quantities, which explains why when you're looking at the history of Western music, you're basically looking at concert hall music. That's the respectable stuff, because it's in writing, it's been maintained in print. He goes on to suggest that Western music notation, which appeared in around the 9th century AD, was a side effect of the first extended period of peace and political strength and military security enjoyed by the Roman Catholic Church since the collapse of the Roman Empire. Which again I think is a significant idea, which is that music or literature, or in fact any art form, does not develop in isolation from political, social and often military circumstances. One can look at the history of England. Oh, the Muppet's laughing at me now. If you look at the history of England, up to throughout the Middle Ages, England's mostly at war. It's either civil war between kings and barons, or it's lots of people going off to the Crusades, or it's a long war, the 100 Years' War with France, and so on. And England, very little happened in England. It wasn't really developing culture. It was only when you got peace, you got social stability, at the beginning of the 16th century, that England began to develop any kind of native, mature form of art. In fact, to develop a whole new language, which would be expressive enough for writing and poetry and literary communication. It's only once the country is free of war and strife and has settled down to a long-lasting dynasty, and also has got rid of Catholicism. The removal of Catholicism from English life in the 1520s provided an impetus for something to replace it, which was part of the cultural drive which, over the course of 40 or 50 years, led us to the likes of Shakespeare and John Donne and Edmund Spenser, the first flowering of English literature, and the music, the specifically English musical form of the madrigals. They come out of peace, not out of war. That's probably a far less profound point than it sounded when I was saying it, but there it is. Just something I wanted to throw in. And connecting this up finally with the 20s dance bands, although they were playing dance music, they were reading. Again, from the introduction to Whiteman's Experiments in Modern Music concert from 1938, the announcer said this: all swing musicians, and by swing in the 1930s he means jazz, have scorn for what they call paper men. That is, people who can read music. Mr. Whiteman's band possesses the added virtue of being able to swing and at the same time read music. And since this is a humorous introduction, he concludes with, they frequently do the two simultaneously. Everybody laugh. But again, you've got this distinction here between written music and music that isn't written. And, jazz music is at 1938 being defined as something that is not, it's not written. It's not written. This has not yet begun to happen. Does the writing give it as much authenticity, respectability as Whiteman's idea of getting pop composers to write serious pieces? Both are perhaps part of the picture. Right, our final bit on saxophones. Again in this concert, the announcer made some rather snotty comments about saxophones. It's 1938, the first major solo recording on saxophone is generally reckoned to have been a recording of the pop song Body and Soul, made in 1939, the next year, by Coleman Hawkins, who had in his time Coleman was never in Whiteman's band, but he'd done his share in dance bands. He'd played in a lot of the dance bands of the 1920s, and in fact he'd started out as a sax player who made animal sound effects mostly on his saxophone, and then had spent some time learning how to play properly. The announcer, I haven't got the exact words here, but the announcer said something about how, you had all these instruments. He talked about the instrumentation of Whiteman's band. It's got strings, although it doesn't have cello. It has brass instruments, though it doesn't have French horns. It's got woodwind. It's got 8 woodwind players who are capable of doubling on all kinds of instruments, oboes, bassoons, if needed. And then he kind of pauses and said, past tense, and said, you could even, I suppose, have them playing 8 saxophones, if you wanted 8 saxophones. And that got a huge laugh from the audience. The saxophone wasn't a respectable instrument at that point. Saxophones had their main place either as novelty instruments played by amateurs in the 1920s, which is where the C melody came in a big way, or a bed of sweet, thick-toned musical padding within a dance band. All of these 20s dance bands have their saxophone sections. Very few jazz bands of the era do. The New Orleans jazz band used trumpet, clarinet and trombone as a front line. Saxophones didn't really come into the picture. It's not until the end of the 30s that the saxophone really begins to emerge as a significant solo instrument, which is where I'm going to bring this particular thread of things to an end. Hugh asks, do the Muffin Men? For those who don't know, this is a 31-year Frank Zappa tribute band, which I played with when it started, and I'm playing with again now when possible. Dave, hi. Yep, fantastic. I've just finished talking. I'm going to play some cheesy music and then sign off and get me tea. Do the Muffins learn Zappa stuff from written scores? No, not really. We listen to the records. I have been known to write out pieces. I think when we first did Zootalures, I wrote out a score for that. And I wrote out a score for Cletus or Ritus or Ritus, a short instrumental from Zappa's LP, The Grand Wazoo. But most of the band actually don't read music, so there's not much point in that. It was for the reference of those who do. So it's mostly learned by ear from records and guesswork, and seeing which bits we like and putting in other bits and seeing how they fit. It's all a bit piecemeal, and it's all completely unrespectable, even though Zappa, of course, was an example of someone who straddled those two fields. He did rock music, but he also wrote a considerable amount of orchestral music, some of which is beginning to find its place in the concert hall repertoire some 30 years after his death. Perhaps that's it. Perhaps you have to die to become respectable. I'll work on that. I'll just have another sip of Bargain Basement Ribena. Right, okay. In the words of Billy Shears, perhaps, it's getting very near the end. So, what shall I play? I played most of the fun, easy stuff that I've got here. Yeah. No, I played that the other day.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4.
I clicked on the wrong bit there. Let me just adjust this. Find the thing that I'm looking for. Right, okay. We'll give that one a go. I'll just I'll stand up because I've suddenly shrunk. Whether it's because I'm overweight or because my computer chair needs replacing. It does this occasionally. It just collapses underneath me. Right, okay. back at something like a respectable height. Now let's give that a go. This is another stalwart of the 1950s British Dixieland revival scene. And that's another part of the jazz story, but I'm not going to deal with that this time. Where are we? Let's get it up again. Yeah, another old familiar chestnut.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Thank you.
20s endings right. Ba-dum, bam, ba-dum, dum. Almost mandatory, by the way, that those records end with the hi-hat going. Right, that brings me up to 9:10, and my stomach is rumbling. Yeah, so I may very well call it a day. Yep, you're right, Hugh. I'm having great fun playing this thing. Let's put it down, and I hope to carry on having great fun playing it. It's a wonderful thing. Right, okay. Well, thank you, Pete. I didn't get the average white band in because I was so busy thinking about the 1920s. So you might have to remind me again next time, and we'll see what I can do. The first thing I'll have to do is practice it. I mean, pick up the pieces. It's one of those pieces. It's one of those numbers that you think it's a repeated riff all the way through, but it isn't. It varies slightly every time, and since it's not the sort of thing for which you can actually get a backing track, I'll have to play along with the original, which means I've sort of got to get it right. Wow. A very difficult idea, but I shall give it a go. I shall get it out and work over it. I'll even see if I can play it on the C melody sax, although I think it might be probably a bit more appropriate on either alto or tenor. Right, thank you, Pete. Why would you get an FB band from the B&W Minstrels? And the thing is that the thing is they existed. They not only existed, they were serious primetime viewing, as the Americans put it, on the BBC. 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock Saturday evening every week. A chorus of guys blacked up. Of course, I could get a Facebook ban for my first ever paid performance. So perhaps I shouldn't talk about that here. But it was not with the George. It wasn't with the George Mitchell Minstrels, but it certainly involved the kind of thing that they got up to before they got on stage. Enough of that. Right. Anyway, thanks, chaps. Nice one, Mop. I'll see you tomorrow, and we'll go and have a walk around and see if we can find this little sort of a Pink Floyd. And thank you to you as well, Christine. A bon nuit à toi. Thanks to everybody once again for being here. I hope it was relatively coherent. It was all very much, as I say, I was thinking about the cat, and about 2 hours before I was thinking, can I actually do this, or am I just going to sit here talking about the cat? But I've saved that until the end. So if you're out there, Pinky, get back home. Your mum's missing you. And on that note, thank you everybody. Thank you for being here. Hope you all enjoyed it in one degree or another. And there'll be another one in a fortnight. Again, what that will be about, I've no idea, but something will come up. It might even be about the average white band. It might be about Scottish guys from Dundee playing funk on an American soul record label. That's a thought, actually. Yeah, that will kind of tie in. Right, okay, enough of that. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for being here. Take lots of care of yourselves, and I will see you in a couple of weeks, if not before, on this Facebook thingy. Take care. Good night.